Which of these stories will you be talking about tomorrow?
What happened? What happened?
Got hit.
God! What's your name? What's your name?
What's your name? Wake up.
What's your name?
What's your name?
Did he say
Medic!
One protester, fractured skull, critical condition after the second night of police violence at Occupy Oakland. The injured man is Scott Olsen, a 24-year-old Iraq veteran. As help reached him, police fired gas canisters at them. Police out of control in Oakland, and a mayor, herself once a victim of the Oakland PD, is now their chief enabler.
The issue is not whether we support the movement. The issue is the safety of the people who are staying overnight.
Tonight, my special comment, why Mayor Jean Quan must either repent and repair or resign. Occupy Atlanta cleaned out. 52 arrests under the pretense of failure to obey lawful commands. Occupy Baltimore threatened tonight.
That doesn't scare us. I mean, if we're going to get beat up, locked up, so be it.
I have not.
Somebody has to stick up for the big picture here.
Occupy Wall Street and healthcare. The march to St. Vincent's Hospital today. Occupy Wall Street and the life mortgages that are student loans. Even the president sits up and takes notice. A bill to cap federal student loan repayments and forgive the debt 5 years earlier. Occupy Day 40 with Keith Shannon, the roommate of the Iraq vet, critically injured in Oakland, with Baltimore organizer Cullen Nawalkowsky, with Dr. Stephen Auerbach of Physicians for a National Healthcare Program, and with economist Robert Reich. Another day, another smear from the political whorehouse that is Fox News.
It turns out some of this movement may be more organized than many think, with ties to the now defunct community activist group, Acorn.
And still, the 1% claims victimhood. The CEO of Bank of America. I, like you, get a little incensed when you think about how much good all of you do, whether it's volunteer hours, charitable giving we do, serving clients and customers well. You ought to think a little about that before you start yelling at us. F*** you. All that and more now on Countdown.
Bank of America.
Good evening from New York. This is Wednesday, October 26th, 377 days until the 2012 presidential election. At this hour, a Marine veteran of the Iraq War lies in Oakland's Highland Hospital in critical condition. Scott Olsen, age 24, member of Iraq Veterans Against the War, suffered a fractured skull when he was apparently struck in the head last night with a tear gas canister, fired, if not by Oakland police, then by someone from one of the other 18 law enforcement agencies charged with suppressing an Occupy Oakland protest. A vigil is underway for Mr. Olsen now in Oakland as friends await word of his condition. The fifth story on the countdown, the Occupy movement in this country has been reliably peaceful through its brief existence. Protesters in many cities have reached out to police proactively, and in many cases they've quoted street cops as saying they support the movement's goals. And while police violence has been dealt out to Occupy protesters in Boston and New York, there has been nothing even remotely on the scale of what has happened in Oakland in the last 48 hours, especially last night, as Occupy marchers tried to return to their camp at Frank Ogawa Plaza, having been cleared out by police, with 105 arrests some 12 hours before. The violence first broke out around 5 p.m. Pacific time yesterday as police clashed with protesters marching towards the plaza. The San Francisco Gate reporting some protesters tried to fight or throw paint at police while other protesters tried to make them stop. A few hours later, large crowds near the plaza entrance were warned they would be targeted with, quote, chemical agents if they refused to disperse. 5 tear gas barrages followed, setting off clashes that went on for hours. Oakland's interim police chief Howard Jordan said, quote, the gas was necessary to protect our officers. According to the San Jose Mercury News, police say they also used beanbag rounds, so-called flashbang grenades, and rubber bullets. You can see that in this video. Scott Olsen is the man on the ground. A flashbang grenade thrown from behind the police line lands near him, and after a brief panic, Mr. Olsen is carried to safety.
What happened? What happened?
Got hit.
I shot. What's your name? What's your name?
What's your name? Wake up.
What's your name?
What's your name?
Did he say
Medic!
In a few moments, I'll talk with Keith Shannon, Scott Olsen's roommate who served 3 years with him in Iraq, and I'll have a special comment on the culpability of Mayor Gene Kwan of Oakland, who just last year had been a victim of the out-of-control Oakland PD. But the Occupy suppression was not limited to the Bay Area. In Atlanta, at least 52 arrests. Protesters were charged with violating an ordinance against being in Woodruff Park after 11 p.m. State Senator Vincent Ford was among the arrestees. Some of those arrested insisted they will return to Woodruff Park, Atlanta. In Albuquerque, more than a dozen arrests after protesters refused to leave their campsite on the University of New Mexico campus. The movement calls itself Unoccupy Albuquerque, given the connotations of the word occupy for the city's many Native Americans. Those protesters say they will be back too. And in Baltimore, no arrests as yet, but a deadline has expired for protesters to respond to the city's demands for an agreement that would, among other things, restrict nighttime access to downtown McKeldin Square. City spokesman Ryan O'Doherty noting in a statement that while camping in the square is prohibited, city government is committed to protecting the free speech rights of Baltimore's citizens, and that is why any citizen is free to peacefully demonstrate at McKeldin Plaza in accordance with establishment guidelines. Occupy protesters have made it clear their rights to free speech and free assembly should not be subject to, quote, established guidelines. Joe Burt is with Occupy Baltimore.
We don't have any plans of going anywhere. That doesn't scare us. I mean, if we're going to get maced, beat up, locked up, so be it.
I have not.
Somebody has to stick up for the big, the big picture here.
And city officials in Boston seem to be getting that big picture. After one spasm of police violence on the 11th of this month, city health officials toured Occupy's camp today and pronounced it relatively clean. The U.S. public seems to get the big picture as well. According to the latest CBS News New York Times poll, 43% of adults say they agree with the views of the Occupy movement. Only 27% say they do not. The other 30% aren't sure. When asked if money and wealth are distributed fairly in America, just 26% say yes, and 66% say no, just like Occupy Wall Street. Now, as promised, Keith Shannon, Scott Olsen's roommate, a member of Iraq Veterans Against the War, joining us now from San Francisco. Thank you for your time tonight on this of all nights, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
What's the latest on his condition? A stable, family present? Do you have a prognosis?
Right now, he's stable but critical. His family is on their way from Wisconsin. They should be in about 11:30 Pacific tomorrow. Right now, he's sedated on a respirator with the skull fracture and swelling in his brain, and the neurosurgeons are still trying to decide whether or not they need to take him into surgery.
I don't mean to put too fine a point on this, but is it clear whether or not his injuries are life-threatening?
I don't believe they're life-threatening, but we don't know if it's going to cause permanent brain damage or not.
Yeah, well, there's something to hold on to, at least in one small space there of good news. When and how did you hear about this injury last night?
I heard about it this morning. I woke up and I had a lot of messages from some of Scott's family, as well as from people at the protest who Scott had told them his roommate's first name, and they were able to find me. And so once I got up, I started looking around, trying to find out where he was, and headed to the hospital once I located him.
So by the time you got there, he was already sedated, I assume?
Yes.
So,
yes.
But we should make that clear, because from the video, it's apparent that he's conscious after he got hit. So there was some lucidity there, and they chose to put him unconscious to hasten his recovery.
Correct. He walked into the hospital, and then they sedated him there.
All right. Well, that's good to begin with. Let's talk about the bigger picture. Were you surprised, even after what happened on Monday night, were you surprised that this escalated to what it did last night?
Definitely. I was quite surprised.
What happened? I mean, is there the Oakland PD obviously has a reputation for claiming provocation for anything and everything it does. Is there any evidence that the kind of riot gear, canister shooting or throwing police, gigantic presence that was there was somehow called for? Were these problems instigated by the protesters in any serious way, to your knowledge?
I've been talking to a lot of the protesters who were there when it happened, and they were just on a peaceful march, and the police officers started pulling them out of the march and arresting some of them, which is when it started getting slightly out of hand, is when the protesters started throwing paint and water. Mm-hmm. And when the protesters tried to march back to their encampment, the police officers opened up with them with rubber bullets, the flashbang, and the smoke canisters.
My understanding is there were ear witness reports, I guess would be the description of these people, that those flashbang grenades sounds almost like something we might use on a rather raunchy 4th of July. My understanding is the impact of those things could be felt 2 miles away. These are not toys we're talking about.
Right, they're definitely very serious.
Tell me about your service with Scott in Iraq. Did your experiences there impact how you see and chose to get involved in this movement?
I definitely did. We both disagreed with the Iraq War even while we were on tour there. And Scott especially has been extremely active with veterans for peace as well as Iraq veterans against the war. So.
What would, obviously you haven't spoken to him, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but you have an assessment of how he would feel about being suddenly a central figure who is internationally known in this effort?
Well, we talk about it a lot, and I think he would appreciate the fact that this experience, no matter how bad it is being used for something good to put light on what's really going on there.
Last question. Are you going to continue, get involved further in Occupy protests going forward?
Yes, I'm definitely going to invest myself even more than I was before.
Keith Shannon, the roommate of Scott Olsen, the Occupy protester who lies in critical condition in a hospital in Oakland tonight, and both members of Iraq Veterans Against War. Our thanks, our best wishes to all of you affected by what happened to him.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. For the latest from Baltimore, where the Occupy camp in McKeldin Square is at risk of being closed by police, I'm joined now by Cullen Nawalkowsky, who is an organizer and member of the Occupy Baltimore media team. Thanks for your time tonight, sir.
Hello. Thank you, Keith.
You just heard that interview and you saw that video from Oakland. That must resonate with you as not necessarily something that's going to be duplicated there, but certainly has to be considered among the palette of possibilities of what you may face. How does it make you feel?
After the outpouring of support that I've seen, the letter that I just saw from a number of labor organizers from AFSCME to the AFL-CIO to fire officers to teachers unions to the FOP itself, offering their support and their advice to the mayor to not attempt this similar path, I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to pursue this peacefully and continue what we're doing.
Let's hope so. All right, tell me about Occupy Baltimore. Did you meet with city officials today? Is there likely to be police action against the park tonight? What's the status?
The legal teams did attempt to contact the city today. They contacted the offices of both the mayor and Parks and Recreation. However, neither office were able to formally respond, and both offices at the moment that I last checked had declined on meeting with the General Assembly.
The city's reportedly offered to let Occupy stay put so long as the protesters stay in the square during the day and only keep 2 people overnight in the square. What's the reaction been to that supposed offer?
There are 2 problems with that. One, it's not feasible considering the type of operation that's going on, considering that we have media, food, we have certain resources that we need to protect, and we need to assure the security of those items as well as the security of the participants. So in that sense, it's not feasible. It's also not feasible in the sense that it's quite tone deaf. It's quite out of touch because even before Occupy Baltimore came there were people staying in that park.
Why is that park so important in terms of its role in Occupy Baltimore?
The location really illustrates a sort of confluence of corruption. It's right in sort of the intersection of the financial and development districts. Right on that corner, you see Bank of America, you see Wells Fargo, T. Rowe Price, a number of financial institutions very close by. And it's also right at the site of the most massive development that has occurred in Baltimore over the past 2 decades, the Inner Harbor, where a number of flagrant, blatant human rights abuses occur on a constant basis. And this is the place where they've poured all the money into at the expense of the West Side and other parts of the city that have just crumbled.
If McKeldin Square is cleared, if there's no negotiation, if there's no way to use that space, will Occupy Baltimore be back? Will it try to retake that square, or what's the future what lies ahead? Do you know?
I think it is important to note that the Occupy movement is not just about a square, and it's not just about a certain physical space. It's very important that we maintain those spaces and we maintain the promise of democracy and assembly. However, the movement transcends any individual location.
Last question, it's a big one. The New York Times CBS poll that indicated that there's still a 30% of the public doesn't have an opinion about the Occupy movement, but the number of people who disagree with it is down to 27%. Does this give you some sense that perhaps you're not working in an apathetic vacuum out here?
I think it's very exciting. I think people have been waking up, and they've been waking up for some time. And all that needs to happen is the word needs to get out more, and people need to be exposed to the facts, because the facts are on the side of this movement.
Cullen, Nawalkowsky of Occupy Baltimore, great thanks. Good luck there.
Thank you, Keith.
And now, as promised, a brief special comment about the astonishing brutality inflicted on the Occupy Oakland protesters over the last 48 hours. Jean Quan has spent more than 20 years in service to the people of the Bay Area. She started with grassroots work to improve Oakland's schools, save its music programs, incorporate the history of the area's minority communities, save the libraries, save the zoos, save the museums, save the arts, push back against the tides of pollution and deregulation, and even in the summer of 2010 to take part as a member of the city council in the protests against the jury verdict after a transit police officer had shot and killed an unarmed black man the year before. And in the last 2 nights, Mayor Jean Quan of Oakland has betrayed all of that. There is no excuse. There is no justification. There is no rationalization for being the mayor who may have begun the great march backward in this country to the days when mayors like Sam Yorty of Los Angeles and Hugh Adonisio of Newark and Richard Daley of Chicago stood back as their police incited, bullied, overreacted, and brutally assaulted protesters at the height of the civil rights and Vietnam movements. Those protests began nonviolently, positively, with singing and marches and cooperation with the authorities. But the police, like the police in Oakland, California this week, they injected the violence. And it escalated and echoed, and soon there wasn't just one Iraq vet in a hospital with a fractured skull, but there were dead men and women on the streets of this country, and no one in this country wants to see that again today. The mayor of any city is not out on the front lines with the cops, and not everything they do can be laying at the mayor's feet. But if one night a group of peaceable protesters, exercising the rights given to them under the Constitution, and not rights made up by the cops for the cops, like lawful command and imminent threat, if they are attacked with tear gas and rubber bullets, and the mayor's only comments are to commend the police chief for a, quote, generally peaceful resolution to a situation, and after that claim democracy is messy after the unprovoked actions of those police horrify a nation, she is endorsing and assuming for herself the responsibility for whatever havoc the out-of-control police officers have wrought. If this country were not poised on a vital, urgent, and massive change in which no longer will we permit governments to aid and abet class warfare by the rich, Jean Quan's story would be recognized as something of a tragedy. But right now, there is only time to note that in July 2010, when she attended as a peacekeeper the protest of the police murder of Oscar Grant, Oakland police responded by opening an investigation on her and threatening to file charges against her. 15 months ago, Mayor Jean Quan was bullied by the Oakland Police Department, and tonight, she is the bully. Mayor Quan is left with 2 choices. She can dismiss the acting police chief, Howard Jordan, and use her mayoral powers to authorize Occupy Oakland to protest again without harassment. Or having betrayed everything she supported and all those who had supported her, she must resign. He never says the words Occupy Wall Street, but the president actually today addresses one of its key issues, relief for those with crushing federal student loans. Robert Reich joins me. The Wall Street protesters themselves today address another concern, health care, a march to a New York hospital squeezed shut by the for-profit system. This is a Fox News minion. He and the anchor models back in the studio are selling the Occupy smear of the day. Occupy is actually run by Acorn, even though they reported last week that Acorn doesn't exist anymore. Tomorrow they'll report Occupy is actually run by Goldstein. And this is Brian Moynihan, the CEO of Bank of America, and he has won the Marie Antoinette Award. He told his staffers, I, like you, get a little incensed when you think about how much good all you do. You ought to think a little about that before you start yelling at us. The next few months will be very surprising to Mr. Moynihan. That's next. This is Countdown. The rich have not just gotten richer, they've gotten 3 times richer. As a new report focuses the raw data and the subsequent raw power, the President of the United States addresses a key issue for Occupy without ever mentioning Occupy. In our 4th story tonight, President Obama moving today to reduce the staggering amount of student loan debt that hamstrings so many even before they can get jobs. The wealth thing first. A new Congressional Budget Office report today. Between 1979 and 2007, the country's wealthiest 1% saw their incomes nearly triple, while at the same time, middle-class incomes barely budged. But despite evidence that wealth disparity keeps increasing, some at the top are now arguing they've been unfairly singled out here. Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan, whose $10 million salary puts him squarely amongst the richest 1%, telling his employees that he thinks Wall Street bankers are really just a bunch of misunderstood do-gooders. He said, quote, "I, like you, get a little incensed when you think about how much good all of you do, whether it's volunteer hours, charitable giving we do, serving clients and customers well." He addressed the ungrateful protesters by adding, "You ought to think a little about that before you start yelling at us." President Obama, while not exactly yelling, indicating that he does identify with the 99%, announcing a plan today at the University of Colorado to cap federal student loan repayments at 10% of discretionary income and forgive the debt therein after 20 years instead of after 25. He also told the students he sympathizes with their situation because he and the First Lady have been there.
Look, obviously we were lucky to have gotten a great education. We were able to land good jobs with a steady income, but it still took us almost 10 years to finally pay off all our student debt. Keep in mind, college isn't just one of the best investments you can make in your future, it's one of the best investments America can make in our future. So we want you in school. We want you in school. But we shouldn't saddle you with debt when you're starting off.
Joining us now, the economist Robert Reich, former Labor Secretary, author of Aftershock, The Next Economy and America's Future. Thanks for your time tonight, sir.
Good evening, Keith.
The loan plan, no vote in Congress. How does he do that, and what impact do you expect that this will have?
Well, the president is trying a number of options that are basically steps in the right direction, not very large. The student loan plan that he unveiled today is a step in the right direction. It does allow students to consolidate their loans and also, as you said, to put a cap on the kind of the paybacks they have to make in any given year. That's a huge help to students, but it is a step in this. It's a small step in the right direction because there's still a huge load of student debt, and a lot of students can't even get jobs these days. What he did yesterday in terms of housing, again, a step in the right direction, but without legislation, without Republicans willing to cooperate on anything, he's not really going to be able to do very much.
To that end, you wrote that Obama should demand that the Glass-Steagall Act be resurrected and the big banks be broken up. Is there any chance that he might decide, however perhaps quixotic that might be at the moment, that given the energy that the Occupy movement would provide him and some political cover, at least at the far left, that he should at least attempt that?
Well, it's not just the Occupy movement. It's also the fact that the Volcker rule, which was basically supposed to keep commercial and investment banking separate, has been basically whittled to death by Wall Street in terms of their lobbyists over the last year. And what came out a couple of days ago was a 300-page piece of just kind of moronic prose. If you got a chance to read it, I actually struggled through it for several hours. It's just exemptions and loopholes for Wall Street. And if that's the way Wall Street is going to react to regulation, then I think the president does have to step up and say, we've got to go back to Glass-Steagall. We've also got to break up the big banks because look what you have rendered. Look what the big banks have done. Look what the suffering is of Americans. And I think also, although the Occupy movement, Keith, is still a very small tip of an iceberg, there is a big iceberg of discontent, of anger, of stress. People look at CEO salaries that are now 350 times the salary of the average worker. They look at the profits that are being raked in by big corporations and by Wall Street, and they say, wait a minute, what happened to us? We are getting on the short end of the stick. Our incomes are going down. We're underwater. 1 out of 4 of us who has a mortgage are underwater. We're losing our jobs. You know, this economy was supposed to be for everybody.
And we saw what the Congressional Office came out with about the trebling of the top 1%'s income since 1979, as opposed to almost no change for everybody else. But your point about the reaction in Wall Street, there's another part of this story, the Bank of America CEO who claims that it's the bankers are being unfairly attacked. Right after it was revealed that his company was engaged in dealings that you've argued are illegal under the new financial regulations. And I know Marie Antoinette never said, let them eat cake, but how foolish does Brian Moynihan have to be, and how representative is he to have said, think a little about that before you start yelling at us?
Well, look, these people, Jamie Dimon, other CEOs on Wall Street, they live in a very insular world. I mean, I don't think they frankly know what is going on in the rest of the country. I don't think they have any sense of the degree of anger and upset and stress that most Americans have experienced since the bubble burst and since Wall Street's excesses became the center focus of everybody's attention. I mean, the bailout of Wall Street also began, a lot of us forget, also began the Tea Party movement. Right. I mean, Americans, it's not that the Tea Party and occupiers are the same. They're very different. But there's a common thread of kind of, we're fed up. This economy is working for a small, narrow group at the top and not for all of us. And there are ways of getting the economy back, Keith. I mean, the economy is supposed to work for us, not the other way around.
The president never mentioned Occupy Wall Street. Did he have to? Have his actions this week and of late been inspired by or impelled by or just speeded up by Occupy?
I don't think he has to mention it. I do think, though, that it has to be in his head. I was in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and I have to go there every once in a while. And, Keith, the interesting thing is Occupy Wall Street has already had a huge success because the tenor of debate in Washington among Republicans and Democrats and other people I met with, people were talking about inequality. They were talking about wealth and income going to the top. They were talking about the fact that so many Americans see the power of money in politics and are so disillusioned with politics because there is so much money coming from the top in politics. This is kind of talk that I haven't witnessed in years in Washington. And so I say to people who are on the streets and people who are being gassed in Oakland, California, and around the country, I say, look, you're already having an effect.
Indeed.
Be patient.
Indeed.
Keep at it.
The economist and former Secretary of Labor, the author of Aftershock, Robert Reich, as always, many thanks, sir.
Thanks, Keith.
That's the movement and student loan debt and the like, the movement and health care reform. And next, breaking news about more punishment for the officer whose pepper spraying of 4 defenseless women made Occupy an international story. The New York Police Department officer whose indiscriminate use of pepper spray helped to lift Occupy Wall Street from local curiosity to national and international cause has been kicked upstairs. Deputy Inspector Anthony Bologna has been reassigned from a Manhattan precinct to Borough Command in Staten Island. Nothing against Staten Island. He's from there, but transferring you there is how police here fire somebody without actually firing them. Moreover, Bologna has already been named a special projects coordinator there, which is as ancillary as it sounds. If you somehow have forgotten what happened on September 24th, perhaps this will refresh your memory. Inspector Bologna, a 57-year-old, 29-year veteran of the NYPD, was docked 10 vacation days, or the equivalent in salary, seemingly the extent of his punishment. But then he reportedly made comments to an obscure website about how he wasn't trying to hit the women with the spray, only some men lying on the street trying to trip officers that you couldn't see in the video or apparently live either. And then if he had to do it all over again, he'd do it the same way. And now he can try to during Occupy Snug Harbor, Staten Island. Still ahead here, Fox News reveals that Occupy is being run by Acorn, even though last month Fox News had revealed that Acorn doesn't exist anymore. This just in from our producer-reporter Erica Ferrari in Manhattan. Significant police presence reported now at Zuccotti Park. That does not necessarily augur bad problems. It's just ahead of a 9 p.m. Eastern march that Occupy Wall Street is going to take and schedule at kind of the last minute in support of and in solidarity with Occupy Oakland and the critically injured Marine protester Scott Olsen. So there is a significant presence downtown in Manhattan, but no signs of any trouble. We'll keep you posted if things change. Meantime, the lack of a specific set of demands from the Occupy movement has been an underpublicized benefit contained within it. The protests' range is thus anything but finite. In our third story on the countdown, today Occupy Wall Street focused on health care, a march to the headquarters of Empire Blue Cross and Blue Shield, then to WellCare Health Plans, the Medicaid fraud people, and finally to St. Vincent's Hospital. This was a charity facility, the kind Michelle Bachmann just said we needed to have to take over for all government medical aid. It was founded in 1849. It closed last year because its owners demanded it make money, and it couldn't because of, you know, the charity part.
Healthcare for 99 cents. Healthcare for 99 cents. What do we need? Healthcare. When do we need it? Now.
When do we need it?
A member of the protest group, Dr. Kenneth Weinberg, spoke to reporters.
I'm an ER physician, and every day that I go to work, I see the outrage, the horrors of what happens to people because they don't have health care. They can't get their prescriptions filled. They can't get follow-up. They can't get procedures done. And I've been seeing it for so many years, and it just sickens me.
I'm joined here now by Dr. Stephen Auerbach, a member of Physicians for a National Health Program who spent a couple of days in Zuccotti Park this week, and we thank you for coming up.
Well, thank you for having me.
Explain the cause and effect, we'll start with this point, the cause and effect between Wall Street and things like St. Vincent's Hospital being shut down.
Sure. Well, we have such a fragmented system, or I should say non-system of care in the United States. So hospitals, we have a whole bunch of hospitals all the way up the east side of Manhattan. Now with the closure of St. Vincent's, there's no hospital on the west side below 57th Street. So we have this fragmented system where the wrong hospitals shut down. They were a great service community hospital. And the problem, as you were saying, is it's now profit, profit, profit. Right. Companies have to make this quarter-on-quarter profit to meet Wall Street expectations. If we had a single-payer, universal health care, Medicare for all, as it were, then what would be happening is everybody would be paying in, and you'd have a universal insurance pool, an all-American insurance pool, that would be covering everybody. It's been analyzed by the GAO, by the CBO, by the Commonwealth Fund, and everybody agrees. It's economically, it makes the most sense. Policy-wise, it makes the most sense. The only problem has been the power of the corporations.
Well, and that obviously raises the question that was so prominent in 2009 and early 2010, which is, do the drug companies and the insurance companies, the healthcare cartel, do they have too firm a grip on this part of an economy, which is they see their lifeblood, for us ever to shake that grip loose?
Well, never say never. We're still fighting the good fight. In fact, polls have shown, mainstream, regular polls, Washington Post, CNN, New York Times, show 65% of the American people would support single-payer Medicare for all. A recent study, academic peer review, professional study, published showed 59% of American physicians would support it. We're as tired of the for-profit health care insurance companies, the fragmentation, the paperwork, the duplication. People go on insurance, people go off insurance, the churn. What is it today? I've got 50 different forms. It makes no sense. Right. And no other country in the world does this except for the United States.
All right, so why as Physicians for a National Health Program, or healthcare program, why are you associated with Occupy Wall Street? My understanding was, from what I've seen on CNN and places like that they're a bunch of dirty hippies down there.
Oh,
and,
gosh.
You appear to own a tie, sir. What are you doing? What is your organization associating yourself with these folks?
Well, you know, if you actually go there and walk through, you'll see folks from all walks of life, young and old, professional, business suits. Let's face it, inequality kills. Poverty kills. Wage stagnation kills. It makes us and the U.S., us sick. So, of course, physicians are supportive of Occupy Wall Street. You know, it really is the same issues of economic inequality and disparity, stagnation for the most of us, and, frankly, the broken, corrupted political system. So it's really all the same issues for the Occupy Wall Street 99%, as those of us fighting for real healthcare reform have been fighting for all along.
Have you interacted a lot with the leaders? Is it difficult? They get very offended by the term leaders, but have you occupied with a lot of the people in the forefront of this? What's your experience been like? Sure,
we've absolutely worked with the process that they've had. So we've been at various meetings. There's different work groups. Our march today was consensed by the whole group, by the New York General Assembly, as part of their official, such as it is, march for today. You know, we're all in this together. It really is the same fight altogether. It's the inequality, the wage stagnation, the income stagnation for the most of us. And, you know, in health care, we refer to this as health disparities, as the social factors that cause problems for health care. So people are more likely to get sick when there's poverty. There's more likely to get sick when there's inequality, and they're less likely to be able to get the care. So, of course, we're for it.
Poverty kills. Dr. Stephen
Absolutely.
Auerbach of the Physicians for a National Healthcare Program, many thanks for coming in.
My pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Fortunately, Fox News knows the truth about Occupy Wall Street. It's secretly run by Acorn, explains news actress Megyn Kelly, and 90% of Americans hate it, explains Bill O'Reilly, who has his fingers on the pulse of the nation. Well, he has his fingers on somebody anyway. Go ahead.
For the first time ever at Joseph A. Bank.
Last month, Fox News reported that Acorn had long since gone out of business. Today, it is claiming that Acorn is pulling the strings at Occupy Wall Street. First, the worst. He explains that 90% of Americans hate Occupy because the protesters criticized John Stossel and Geraldo Rivera, because that's what this is really all about. Geraldo Rivera. You know who the right says is behind Occupy today? Acorn. I think it's sweet that they share power with the Muslim Brotherhood, the Nazis, the communists, the anti-Semites, and the racists. Don't you? Next. First, because these next clowns only hear the sound of those words. They don't know what they mean or when they are them. Here are Countdown Top 3 nominees for today's worst persons in the world. The bronze, right on cue, to pretend Republican candidate Herman Cain. Cain stepped back from comments made at a Tea Party rally that Cain attended yesterday. A man named Apostle Claver announced, quote, "It's the Democratic Party that's the racists." Cain's campaign said, "Our campaign is all about promoting civil dialogue." Well, that's a change, apparently. 6 years ago, Cain wrote, "Congressional Democrats do not want all Americans to drink from the same retirement fountains. They insinuate that we are not smart enough to ride in the front of the retirement bus with them. At least with separate water fountains, blacks and whites each had water to drink." Plus, there was this remark during the campaign that, again, quoting, "African Americans have been brainwashed into voting Democratic," which, if true, is no problem for Mr. Cain because, as they say, no brain, no pain. The runner-up, Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin. The recall effort begins in 20 days. Unfortunately, it turns out that on November 15th, a loophole opens in the election laws of Wisconsin. The personal donation limit of $10,000 to a gubernatorial campaign will not be in effect for the following 60 days. Wisconsin GOP's chair summed it up: "We can accept unlimited money for a 60-day time period, so you're going to see a lot of positive, wonderful ads about what's going on in Wisconsin." Courtesy of personal donations by Charles Koch, David Koch, their imaginary sister Cherry Koch, their fitness expert cousin Diet Coke, their failed entrepreneur nephew New Coke. But our winner, Billo the Clown, frankly, I'm glad to see this. He's been in a terrific slump lately, but there's nothing like the march of progress to inspire him to new levels of stupidity, specifically Occupy Wall Street. "I'm an independent, all right?" Let me stop you right there, Goober. You're not an independent, you're a puppet. You have a job, and it's at the political whorehouse that is Fox News. "I looked at this group in the beginning and gave them a shot and wanted to know what they were all about. Once they started to attack our personnel here, including John Stossel and Geraldo and all that, I said, you know what? I don't want any part of these people." Because the measure of any societal change in American history has always been how it treats a talking mustache who exceeded his hipness shelf life by 35 years, and a lunatic who once said on the air that if the world was dying of thirst, of course you should raise the price of water. I guarantee you that 90% of independent Americans, Juan, are saying the same thing. We don't like them. We don't trust them. We think they're radicals. And if anybody throws in with them, we're going to vote against that anybody. That's what we're going to do, John. What? Juan Williams actually awoke from his salary-induced slumber to point out that all polling so far show that Americans in fact agreed with the Occupy protesters. In one case, the number was nearly 60%. Wait until you see the new poll on it, okay? It ain't going to be that 60. It's going to be down to 40 or 35. And the more loons like you saw over the weekend, and they will. Because in addition to thinking he has his own cops, in fact, they were his wife's cops, Bill also thinks he controls the polls and also the traffic lights and the weather. Because they continue to get themselves in the media, they've got to do this stuff. The media is tired of this story now. O'Reilly recorded those comments about 5 p.m. Eastern yesterday, 6 p.m., just before one of the network newscasts led with Occupy Wall Street, and 12 hours before the police skull-cracking in Oakland made all the morning news chat shows, and the day before the New York Times poll found only 27% disagreeing with Occupy. Nice prediction, Sparky. Billo the Clown, today's worst person in the world. First, the protesters were drugged-up hippies. Then, they were anti-Semitic. Then, Yesterday, they were part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Our number one story now, the right wing has grasped at its next straw. The Occupy movement is actually being organized by the most vile of community organizations, Acorn. In an article on FoxNews.com's front page titled Exclusive, Acorn Playing Behind-Scenes Role in Occupy Movement, the article points to the involvement of a group called New York Communities for Change, headed by former Acorn New York director John Kest. It claims that NYCC is paying homeless people to attend the protest as well as raising money for the protests while claiming they're collecting money for the United Federation of Teachers. They were even able to get quotes from unnamed NYCC employees. Oh, this must be real. What people don't understand is that Acorn is behind this. And yes, we're still Acorn. There is still a national Acorn. Acorn does not exist anymore. Between James O'Keefe's not pimp videos and Fox's subsequent slander and hatchet jobs, its survival was impossible. And another thing, how behind the scenes is the supposed involvement? The article cites a piece that Mr. Kest wrote for the Huffington Post titled, Why We're Joining Occupy Wall Street. He's tried to keep it a secret. The article was posted on September 30th. It was already day 14 of Occupy. It's also not exclusive to FoxNews.com, and maybe the reporter could have saved himself some time by watching that Fox and Friends gaggle over 2 weeks ago.
It's interesting. A number of labor unions have thrown their support behind these anarchist Occupy Wall Street people.
Workers United, Transport Workers Union, and the Working Families Party, which was in part helped to be created by Acorn, the Acorn of the past.
Some evidence even an Acorn offshoot is behind it.
It's really sad to see what Teller's doing these days, isn't it? But that's what Fox News does, find a group to scare its audience, mention it on the air, and then have a phony reporter write about it and report it again as news. Let's turn now to Sam Seder, host of the nationally syndicated radio show Ring of Fire, as well as the web radio program The Majority Report. Good to see you, Sam.
Nice to see you, Keith.
Who do you have in the pool about who it's going to be tomorrow? And I think Goldstein is way too easy. We've already referred that Goldstein's behind Occupy. So who else could it be?
Well, it could be anybody at this point. In fact, when I knew I was coming on, I thought, oh, well, of course, it's going to be Chairman Mao.
Yes.
But I went to to Fox.com. That was yesterday. Literally, they had said that it was the Red Army that was actually behind it.
Jesus.
So they can't seem to stick to one boogeyman here. And so it's back to Acorn, or actually Acorn's office. It's not actually Acorn. We're talking about the undulating office that sends out all of the Acorn vibes, sort of like they shoot back into time, send it through the office. I don't know, it's fairly complicated. That's why they get the exclusive.
And you have to get a theremin to make that sound.
That's right.
You pointed something out that I like to note, that the conspiracy theories have not been given a lot of time to breathe. There's a new one every day. Why are they not, or is it just throw it against the wall, and if it doesn't immediately stick, they drop it? Or is perhaps the point that you just throw them all out there and then everybody gets to pick whatever is their favorite phobia? The Islamophobia can grab the Muslim Brotherhood, and the people who hate Obama can grab Acorn, and the sports fans can say it's really, well, the next one's going to be it's the locked out NBA players are responsible for this.
Of course. Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I tend to think they're just freaking out, and they can't find anything that will stick. I mean, they have actually, I saw a piece by a right-winger, I think it was today or yesterday, saying that Obama actually in 2000 was in an Occupy Chicago protest, or Occupy Chicago-like protest 11 years ago. Sort of, what they're doing here is they're playing with the time-space continuum.
Exactly.
And somewhere in the middle, I guess, is the truth. But you're right. Every day it seems like they come out with another sort of fake story. It's the Muslim Brotherhood. It's, undoubtedly it'll be Soros next, is buying them pizza, I guess.
Yes.
Who knows?
70 million pizzas.
Maybe. I mean, maybe it's the
70 million Nazi sympathizer pizzas from Greece or whatever.
A pizza cartel.
But why? I guess I know the answer to this one, but why do they need this? Why can't they? I mean, presumably they have people at home who are sitting there going, up with the rich and down with the me. Why can't they just argue it on the points and to make that stuff up rather than come up with a boogeyman in the background?
I think it's there's a couple reasons. I think because there's no hierarchy there, and it's clearly a grassroots. There's really no way to tie it in to any institution that they have already sort of created boogeymen out of. And so I think that, combined with the fact that their message is resonating. I mean, it's resonating to the extent that you even had Eric Cantor last week actually say the words income disparity.
Yes,
I mean,
right.
I never thought in my lifetime I would ever hear the number 2, arguably the number 1 Republican in the House saying the words income disparity. And so, and of course, his response was that we need to cut taxes,
Right.
but on the rich for it. But
He was in favor of it.
Exactly, of course. But he was in favor of increasing it, but he did say the words, and I think that's what's really freaking them out. It's connecting with the American public.
Also, once again, my mirror theory applies here, that everything that is accused, the Republicans are accused of, the Republicans must thus accuse back. So the liberals find out that Dick Armey and those groups and the Koch brothers have been funding the Tea Party. Therefore, the conservatives have to make up somebody. There's got to be somebody else who's doing this to blame because it's a game of tag.
Right. Well, I mean, this is, again, what Fox does, what the right does is to create these sort of identity politics.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that they're having trouble with is that the people down in, what is formerly known as Zuccotti Park are all different types of people. And it's resonating with people across the political spectrum. It's resonating with people, across the 99% of the country. And so I think they're having trouble going to their normal game plan, and they're freaking out.
Sam Seder of Ring of Fire and Majority Report, also the evil genius actually behind Occupy Wall Street. Him
right.
and Professor Moriarty.
You have the exclusive.
That's it. Great, thanks. Thanks for confessing. Please see the sin taker on the outside. That's Countdown for Wednesday, 377 days till the 2012 presidential election. I'm Keith Olbermann. Give yourself a round of applause for getting through yet another day of this crap. Good night and good luck.